welcome to Olsem Wanem. I'm Deborah Prentice. Human trafficking is often described around the world as the modern-day slavery. But does it exist in Papua New Guinea?
Human trafficking is modern-day slavery, as you correctly said. It is a heinous crime. It affects people around us. No one is safe from trafficking. It can happen to children. It can happen to disabled. It can happen to women. It can happen to men as well. And it basically entails exploitation of people. It can be exploitation for sexual purposes, or it can be forced labor. IOM, the organization that I represent in PNG, is the International Organization for Migration, and we have the global mandate to combat trafficking. And we do this in many ways. In PNG and in many other countries, we do it through work with the government. We do it through work with the civil societies. We provide direct assistance. We also assist search and rescue operations, and of course humanitarian and repatriation assistance to the victims.
What are some practices you've seen in Papua New Guinea that can be categorized as human trafficking?
Well, there's a number of phenomena that can fit the definition. We certainly have seen and received anecdotal evidence of forced labor, where people are forced to work, then they're not paid, and sometimes not allowed free movement. We have seen evidence of sexual exploitation, where young girls and women are exploited for sexual gain, sexual profit. And we have also seen in PNG the enslavement and trafficking of foreign nationals. So there are many elements to it, and it's quite a multi-dimensional phenomenon that involves many countries. It can be national and international.
Do you think a lot of Papua New Guineans are aware of this issue?
I think that awareness is improving. Thank you to the efforts of the National Human Trafficking Committee, and including the efforts of my colleagues to my left. And I think there's still many areas to be covered. I think if you go on the street, most people will not be able to give you a straight answer on what it is. But I think with time, it is something that will gain momentum, and we will have more awareness in the country.
Enid, we move on to Enid. Can you tell us how gender-based violence is connected to human trafficking?
It's all about the abuse that happens to human beings, and in GBV, it happens to GBV is for men, women, children. They're all vulnerable to that. In the case of human trafficking, it's about the same thing as well. It's about abuse, exploiting another person, taking away their human rights as well. And basically, if we look at services for victims of trafficking, it would also include the same types of services that we would then have for victims of gender-based violence. However, there may be specific assistance that may be required for those victims of trafficking.
Do some of our traditional practices relate to human trafficking?
We do have some cultural practices that could also be seen as contributing to trafficking. But the thing is, like, a lot of people don't understand the issue, and so we still need to get them to understand this issue and be able to identify with these cultural practices, which could then potentially, lead to trafficking of persons.
We also have Mr. Mark Jumagot, who is the acting principal legal officer for the Department of Justice and Attorney General. Now, can you tell us the difference between smuggling and human trafficking?
Okay, thank you, Deborah. In terms of human trafficking, it's the exploitation of a particular person where, without their consent, they are brought to another place to do or to perform something that the trafficker wants. In terms of the smuggling side of or the smuggling aspect of it, it's the person who wants to go from another country to another country, and he has to pay someone to take him across illegally. So in terms of those two, human smuggling and human trafficking, they're both different in each of their own respective aspect, but when it comes to smuggling, it can become a case of human trafficking if the person was brought to another country and then exploited there.
Is there any more types of human trafficking that any of you would like to specifically indicate?
I think what I'd like to add to that is that some victims of trafficking may actually not know that they're victims. And this is very important. So when we're talking about raising awareness and recognizing trafficking and recognizing different types and categories of trafficking, we mustn't forget that these preventative measures we're taking are not just the public at large. It is for people who are victims and don't realize that they're victims.
Mr. Jumagot, what does the Constitution say about human trafficking?
Well, basically, under our Constitution, it recognizes the Declaration of Human Rights. So, human trafficking is something that goes against that basic human rights standard. So, therefore, the government has amended the criminal code to include human trafficking as a criminal offense, and which also attract a strict or stiffer penalties if someone is caught doing that. And also, protection is also accorded to the victims if the victims have been identified.
What are the penalties for human trafficking?
The offender, the penalties ranges from 15 to 20 years, and if the victim dies from the commission of the offense, the penalty is life imprisonment.
What are the procedures that you follow in referring human trafficking victims to relevant authorities?
At the moment, we don't have any cases of trafficking that have been prosecuted or victims that have been identified that we would, use through the referral systems that are in place. But the National Human Trafficking Committee has been working towards developing a national referral mechanism, which would be similar to the gender-based violence or FSV referral systems that we've already got in place. So most of the service providers that are in that system would be the ones that we would tap into if we had cases of trafficking. And so if there was a case, then we would use that system, get through the hospitals for medicals with the police and all others that are in that system to actually assist the victims.
So is it okay for me to say that no one has been arrested as yet for human trafficking at all?
In the country, we haven't had any cases that have been prosecuted as yet. We do have suspected cases and people coming in and reporting that this has been happening here, but we still need to carry out investigations to ascertain whether or not they are cases of trafficking.
What are the challenges in implementing this particular law on human trafficking?
Basically, we could say the challenges lies in the awareness and the training of the relevant personnel, where they can go out to its provinces or border provinces where there's risk of human being trafficked into the country, and to identify a particular person that has been trafficked or the offender itself. So there's a huge challenge in that aspect, where we need to conduct more trainings and awareness in terms of that.
Which age group is most vulnerable of human trafficking?
it depends on the type of trafficking. If we're talking about trafficking for sexual exploitation, I would say it will be girls from 16 to maybe 30. If we're talking about forced labor, that can be anything from under 18, underage boys to ripe old age. Forced labor will be focused more on men, sexual exploitation more on women, but that is not to say that we don't see men and women represented in both types of exploitation, types of forced labor. And also, if I could add to what Mark said about the certain challenges of implementing the legislation and enforcing the new law, I would say that one of the challenging areas, one of the aspects is that trafficking is such a complex phenomena and involves so many different agencies, everything from Department of Justice, sometimes even defense, police, prosecutors, customs, immigration, that you don't just need to train all of these people, not only at central level, but also provincial level, sometimes even local level. So it's really quite a vast effort that you need to undertake before everybody knows what it is. People know you don't need to train police officers to understand what theft is or what murder is, but trafficking is something a little more complex and you need to train a lot of people on this.
According to the 2013 report from the UN, after firearms and drug trafficking, human trafficking is the third most widespread trafficking in the world. Why is this so?
Very simple. It's incredibly lucrative. People make a lot of money from forced labor. People make a lot of money from sexual exploitation of women. And unfortunately, the world we live in is such that if there's money to be made, bad people will take advantage of that.
From reports on human trafficking in PNG, there was a lack of legislative framework in addressing human trafficking until 2013. What are some things that you think made the relevant authorities take a step forward to categorizing human trafficking as a criminal offense?
Before the legislation was enacted, there may have been cases that have come before the relevant government agencies, and when enforcing the particular legislation that applies to a person that comes into the country illegally, it usually goes to the customs and the immigration people, and usually if a victim has been identified, they don't have the necessary legislation to deal with the person, and they usually deport that person out of the country. So I think that was one of the aspects where there was a need for that particular legislation on human trafficking to be enacted by Parliament.
How do we go about reporting such cases? Who do we talk to if we are witnessing human trafficking or someone is caught in such situation?
Well, the best practice would be, depending on who you are and what situation you're in, but statistically speaking, the first port of call should be the police. If you're on the street and you come across a situation or an event or a place that you believe can be hosting something resembling trafficking in persons, you should call the police.
I think in terms of reporting, with the new amendment to the criminal code, the police, they have been trained to deal with such situations. So they are there if anyone has witnessed or has come across cases of trafficking. the police, they've already been trained to handle this type of cases.
Ini, do you guys have a hotline for such cases?
Our office doesn't have a hotline, but the toll-free hotline is currently housed within the IOM. And there is a number that's out there for people to call. The number is 7100-7777. If you have any queries relating to trafficking, if you're unsure of whether or not it is a case of trafficking, we're encouraging people to contact that number and speak to the staff at IOM about that, and they shall be able to assist with those queries.
I think my message would be, first of all, to remember that you have rights, and some rights that you have are integral to your being, and no one has the right to violate those rights that you have. And if anyone is forcing you to do something that you do not want to, that constitutes usually a violation of your rights, and that should be the first thing that should alert you that something that's happening to you is not right.
If you're in a situation where your rights are being taken away from you, if you're being abused in any way, that there are services out there are people out there who can actually provide assistance. I guess we just need to know where to go to, but it's not good to remain silent. We need to come out and have these people also prosecuted if they're violating your rights in any way.
It's basically your rights, if you feel that, or if you see that your rights have been violated and you've been exploited in such a way, then you have to come out and report it or talk about it. Don't be a victim and just stay quiet in a particular or in a corner and then just take it on. You have to come out and talk about it.
The only one thing I would add is to encourage people to make informed decisions. Don't believe everything everyone tells you. Don't trust somebody just because they tell you the situation is such, or that offers you a job that things that don't sound right, and you accept it, or usually if it sounds too good, it usually is too good to be true. So one last thing I'd like to add is seek out information and make informed decisions before you get into trouble.
Does anyone know the percentage of human trafficking in Papua New Guinea, and do we have enough research into this particular issue in the country?
I would go out on a limb and say that we don't know the exact numbers. Given the clandestine nature of the phenomenon, it's very difficult to know the exact number, even if we did a lot of research. But we know enough to say that it's happening. We know enough to say that it's happening in many different places, to many different types of people. And we know enough to say that we have to act together and we have to act now.
Examples of human trafficking in Papua New Guinea. Exchanging brides as a form of compensation. Abuse of orphans by relatives, such as child labor. Enticing women and girls into prostitution. Dubious recruitment practices by companies, especially logging, mining, security, plantations, and others. The government of PNG has passed a law criminalizing any act involving the recruitment, movement, transportation, harboring, transferring, and receipt of persons through force, deception, threat, or other coercive means for the purpose of exploitation. Up to 20 years behind bars is the penalty. If you need more information or would like to report a case, call toll-free hotline 7100-7777. And that's all we have time for on Olsem Wanem. If you would like more information on human trafficking, please do not hesitate to contact us via the address showing on your screen or visit us on our Facebook page. Until then, I'll see you again next week.